quizzical mind, somebody that likes to solve puzzles.
Someone who can work within a team.
I think you have to be quite meticulous.
You have to persevere.
Intelligent enough to understand the logic of the code.
Have empathy for their users.
The first thing is patience.
Likes to solve riddles.
A good coder is someone who can think through clearly and implement their idea into code.
10 years ago, we were coding for computers, but now everything is a computer.
A lot of the redundant and rudimentary stuff we do as a developer will be taken over by these automated processes.
Things like human brain interfaces and machine learning and neural networks.
Potentially a new language that doesn't even exist yet.
Still believe we have a bright future, despite self-driving cars and artificial intelligence.
Interacting with a keyboard-less layout.
I think we're going to see a lot more voice interaction with devices.
Hopefully not computers coding themselves. This would be like, how it's called, the singularity, right?
I code because I love coding.
I code because I love, for me, it's like a brain puzzle.
Because I'm a builder, and I ran out of Lego bricks.
There's a lot of creative juices that flow when I write code.
Because I like making things, basically.
Coding is fun.
It's a fact.
Having a problem that you turn into a solution through code in a job that I can imagine doing.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Oracle Code Boston. It's great to be here with you today. It's actually sunny now. I was here for the marathon yesterday where it was bitterly cold, but I'm glad to see the sun is out and shining. So this is our premier developer event series. Welcome to Oracle Code Boston. This is the 27th event that we've been running around the world over the last 14 months or so, and we're really happy to have you here today. We've got a lot of great content to cover today, spanning machine learning and AI, containers, microservices, and chatbots, blockchain, of course, databases, Java, DevOps, low-code platforms. We run the interesting technologies, and you'll hear from a lot of interesting speakers from Oracle and also outside of Oracle in the community as well. There's also a great exhibit area that I'd like to ask you to see some interesting demos. We've got an IoT beer setup out there. We've got a number of hands-on activities as well. So please check out the demos when you get a chance. If you'd like to follow along with the schedule today, I encourage you to download this app from the App Store or the Google Play Store. And you can follow along. You can search for Oracle Code Boston. You can get the schedule right on your phone. If you're into social media, please follow us at Oracle Devs. And if you have any tweets, please use the hashtag Oracle Code. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. Ken Cousin is a noted expert in Java. He's a Java champion. He's a developer champion at Oracle, and he's written a number of books about Java, Groovy, Grails, a number of Java-related topics. And he's here to talk to you about the past, present, and future of Java. Ken, a warm round of applause for Ken.
Thank you. First of all, the app works. I got a notification that I should come to this keynote, so that was good planning. Thank you. So at any rate, the name of this talk is Tales from the Jar Side. It's a little different than what I normally do. It's not a highly technical talk or anything like that. It's actually much more personal. I'm going to be talking more about my own history with Java. Just as was mentioned, I've written a couple of books, but in case you want to get in touch with me or anything, there's my email address, homepage, blog, Twitter handle. Feel free to contact me however you like. My most recent book is this one called Modern Java Recipes from O'Reilly, and I brought a few copies to give away. I also have put together a nice little random number generator to pick who to give them to using JShell. So I needed an excuse to use JShell, and I found one, so that's good. Also, if you have a Safari account, if you have the Safari Books Online account, I have a whole bunch of videos out there. and teach training classes and everything. Okay, that's about all the self-marketing I can stomach. Let's move on. I was a career changer. I didn't do anything in IT for a long time. When I first got in, like many IT people, I came from another field. I was in engineering, actually. So this was a long time ago. This was back in the 80s and 90s. So I was in mechanical engineering and mathematics, and then eventually went to aerospace engineering and wound up getting a PhD and everything in there. So that meant, now I was never the sort of person to take things apart and put them together. So it was always a running gag in my family that I was in engineering at all. The goal was always to do something computer related. So there's going to be lots of math and software involved. So eventually the plan was to be a professor, and unfortunately that didn't work out, or at least I thought at the time, unfortunately. I know better now. Because the academic market pretty much collapsed. If you know any postdocs, if you know any people in the academic environment, you know this. It's been very, very difficult for them. But my advisor was an assistant professor, and he didn't get tenure, and I saw what that was like, and I thought, well, I don't want to do that. So I went to an industrial research lab in Connecticut, actually. So I'm not exactly local, but relatively. Connecticut, of course, as you are well aware, is basically half Red Sox and half Yankees, you know, half Patriots, half Giants. I am comfortably on the Red Sox side, so that's good. It's easy to be a Red Sox fan here. Everybody's a Red Sox fan. I'm on the front lines, okay? I mean, I'll go into a department store and there's a table. It's got half Red Sox shirts and half Yankee shirts. And how do you knock over half a display? It's not so easy, you know? Any rate, so I went to United Technologies, and I was doing research at the time. UTC is the parent company. At the time, it was this collection of companies, Pratt & Whitney, aircraft engines, Sikorsky helicopters. That was the aerospace stuff. And then the Otis elevators and Carrier air conditioners were on the commercial side, and there were NASA contracts and things like that. And my area for a long time was the aeroacoustics of jet engines, which sounded really cool, no pun intended. Actually, that was a good one. Never mind. But that meant lots of math, and unfortunately, my programming language at the time was Fortran. The nightmares have ended, but it took a while. I used to think Off by One Arrow was my middle name. Any rate, I actually went online, and I found an old paper I'd worked on, or NASA contractor report, and I was tempted to actually show you a piece of it, and then I looked at it, and I can't read it anymore. I have no idea what's in there. I imagine I knew at one time, but it's been so long since any of that happened. So at any rate, I tried to transition from Fortran to Java. This is when Java first came out, the mid-90s, and I had to make the object-oriented leap at that point. And Bruce Eccles' Thinking in Java was really the most helpful book for me at the time. So that was the first edition of that book. Of course, there's been 4 editions, and they could really use a 5th. Just makes me feel old. Eventually, at the research center, I joined an AI group. Now, nowadays, that would be really hot, and I would get this huge raise and everything. It would be very impressive. We worked on neural networks and genetic algorithms. At the time, it was kind of an afterthought. Neural networks hadn't panned out. Genetic algorithms were just another optimization mechanism. So it's not as cool as it was then, but that's what put me in the IT field and told me that 10 to 15 years of coding in Fortran hadn't really taught me anything about software development. So I had to go back to school at that point to go get a degree in computer science. Now, one of the things I worked on is I was looking for excuses to use Java. You know, I'd learned it, but I didn't really have a lot of experience with it. And one of the things that came up at the time was this idea of doing elevator failure predictions. The Otis people were collecting lots and lots of statistics on the behavior of elevators, and there were people who had a math background in the research center who had done lots of statistical algorithms and analyses, and I had this ridiculous idea of putting a Java Swing GUI on top of a Fortran program, and it was an adventure. Just by the way, the files were considered huge at the time. They were 6 gigs of data, you know, if you can imagine something so massive. 3 lessons from that project: don't do that. I assume I'm the only person in here who's ever put a Java GUI on top of a Fortran program. Now that I've said that, is that true? Has anybody ever done that? If you have, my condolences, you know. So don't do that. I mean, JNI turns out to be a thing. You know, it did work, but it was the C to Fortran bridge that was the complicated one because they viewed the order of arrays differently, and it was all the little endian and big endian stuff. And I can say this, it did work on my machine eventually. I never was able to port it anywhere, but it did work. I was able to put buttons and knobs and sliders and get everything to work, so that was fun. But as I say, I realized that spending all that time in a related field had not really taught me about software development. And in fact, in Fortran, they often advocated as good practices things that we now know would be really horrible. Common blocks, if you've ever heard of them in Fortran, the idea is to have shared data that goes across many, many different files, different procedures and everything. And this, of course, we now know is the exact opposite of what we should be doing. You know, and that was a recommended practice. I also realized that when I worked in a field that they called computational fluid dynamics, I worked on programs that had, I don't know, 50, 60,000 lines of Fortran. And looking back on it, I don't remember ever seeing anything that I could legitimately call a test case. We'd save data and we'd look at it and we made lots of pretty pictures. But was there ever an actual test to say, let's prove this is right and something automated and something working? And of course, that never happened. So, at any rate, I went back to school and I got the master's in computer science. And of course, I didn't have a huge number of lines of code to point to as experience, so I went and got the original Sun Certified Java Developer certification, taking a test there. And of course, I have to give credit to Kathy Sierra. You know, this is before she wrote the Head First Java book with Bert Bates. She is one of the co-founders of that Java Ranch site, which is a certification prep site. It's still going, still has a pretty good forum for questions and everything. And I spent a lot of time there and got the certification. Now, this was the spring of 2000, so the bubble had burst, but we didn't know it yet. I mean, Enron wasn't going to collapse until, probably another 6 months. And things were already headed down, but we didn't know. So suddenly I had options. I hadn't had options for my career for many, many years, and this was really enjoyable. And I decided that instead of becoming an active developer, I would go teach technical training classes, which was actually the part about being a professor that I'd been attracted to in the first place. I'd always wanted to do that sort of thing. What I realized I wanted was to learn new things and then tell everybody about it. You know, I really enjoy that part of it. And that gave me a chance to follow that passion there. So at the beginning, I taught lots and lots of intro Java classes. Probably in 2000, 2001, I probably taught an intro Java class a month, you know, and learned a lot in the process, of course. If you really want to learn something, try teaching it and dealing with the questions that come from that. It's really hones in on exactly where the gaps are in your knowledge. And of course, again, I was always looking for an excuse to write code to support that effort. So one of the things I wrote at the time was an applet. You know, it's still bittersweet to me that applets are now going away. But I tried to recreate this, and that's so many hard drive crashes ago, I can't even tell you. But I'd managed to port the idea over to a Swing UI. So this is the code in IntelliJ, and I just want to show you that I basically have a class here that is going to extend JPanel, and I've got all this, and I'll just run it just to give you an idea what this looks like. So the idea was that when it was an applet, the students would all load a page that had the applet embedded in it, and it looks something like this. And you can see this would just pick from a random list of terms, because the hard part in an intro Java class was teaching object-oriented programming, and the terminology was such a burden, you know, such a barrier to understanding. And each time somebody heard a term during class, they would click on it on their machine, and I also did this, of course. If you think I actually Googled the Windows 3.1 to DOS sound, yes, you're exactly right. You know, I did. And I even built in a little restart and everything. And honestly, now when I revisited it, when I rebuilt it, just more or less preparing for this talk, I have it in a GitHub repository now. I'll show you a link to that later if you like. And it's got a Gradle build file, and in fact, you can run it from Gradle. or it also generates an executable jar file, so that if you just want to double click on the jar file, that runs too. So you're welcome to, well, that or anything that I'm going to show you, you're more than welcome to. So that was just an excuse for me to play around with a lot of these things. There's a picture of it, of course. I got to play with Swing. I got to work with the Collections API, loaded resources like that WAV file you heard and everything. And it was a nice learning experience, and it was something that the students could do in class. And of course, I always told them they'd win fabulous prizes. Though at the time, my fabulous prizes were Wild Cherry Lifesavers. You know, that seemed to be a good approach. So at any rate, that was one thing I did back then. But the one that I used the most for many years was this thing I called Jeopardy GUI, which was desperately trying to avoid the copyright infringement. Or is that trademark infringement? I'm not exactly sure which. But either way, it's a Jeopardy game, obviously. And at the time, the build tool of choice, this is the late 90s, well, actually this is early 2000s, we were still pretty much using Ant at this point. And basically, I'd seen somebody put a game board in front of the screen and just had people raise their hands, and I thought, well, wait a minute, Java's got RMI. I could build an app so that the students could click on a button and have it take control of the game board and just have RMI operating inside a classroom and use a database for the questions and all that stuff. And of course, I was operating on Windows at the time, so the database was using Microsoft Access, so I could go into a classroom and just set up the good old dreaded JDBC, ODBC connection that way, if you remember all that horror. And the concession I made to not embarrassing people is I made it so that the scores were kept by team. So it didn't matter who answered the question, as the scores went up and down based on the group of people you were in. Now, to give you an idea what this looked like, let's see, here it is. This is the Jeopardy game, and I'm going to start it up here. And then I can't believe it. Again, this was so many hard drive crashes ago, but it turned out I emailed the jar file to a friend in the early 90s. And when I did that, I found the jar file. Now, this code's not in my GitHub repository because it's far too embarrassing at this point. I really have to clean it up before it's ready yet. But I get the categories out of a database. It lists a bunch of categories. I'll just select 4 was always a nice number, and create the game board this way, and that's what the game board looked like. And again, I have a bunch of questions here of various values. And then the fun part was that, let's see, let me clear this, is that I actually built a jar file again that had the RMI stubs in it. So I could say, let me make that bigger. I could say java-jar, and in the distributions directory, there was my jar file, or they could just double click on it, and this way I could create a player and a team. So let me put, I don't know, how about Scott Tiger for Oracle? I need a name, you know. And and see the player would get a little buzzer there, and no reason I can't make another one. Let's put in a second one. So this was under Documents, Java, Jeopardy GUI, you know, and then I'll say again, java-jar, distributions, jep.jar. Let's put, I don't know, how about Bill G at Microsoft? That one's probably going to get questions wrong, you know, at any rate. So just to give you an idea, I'll put this over with the game board just so you can see them. But these would be distributed around the room, and all that would happen is I would pick a question, and it would come up, and then somebody would click on the button, and that would take control of the game board. See, it would come up with a title here, and then I could say they were right or wrong, and I could show the question if necessary. And you see the scores would go up and down based on whatever the result was. And you can see them move up and down like that. Now, one thing, unfortunately, by running it the way I ran it, I don't know where the daily double is. I got to find that real quick. Of course, there was a daily double where the scores can really change, you know. So I'm just going to arbitrarily check. I always printed it out to the console. There it is. Okay, so let's select that, and you could bet up to your total score, and of course you always want to bet it all. Right? See, got the song and everything. So of course that's right, and that's basically how the game ran. And it was always fun to do because, as you know, it's giving out the code and talking about how you do the database access and how you do the RMI stuff and everything. It was a lot of fun there. My most interesting story, though, that I think about from that is one time we were doing an open house for a new training center that was opening up, and the game basically just operated off of a table in the database. So you could add a table for anything, you know. I just needed some number of categories and at least one question for each point value all the way up. So we put in questions about the company or about, in other words, it had nothing to do with technical stuff. And we had a room full of salespeople in there. And I learned an interesting thing about salespeople. They were just banging the heck out of the mouse because they didn't care whether they got questions right or not. They just wanted to be first. It was amazing because I'd reset the board and then you hear bang, bang, bang. It's like, look, I haven't even asked the question yet, you know. And the scores would be minus 500, minus 1,000, whatever. They didn't care. It was just very dramatic that way. But at any rate, this one was, again, a very good learning experience. And once I clean up the code, I will make it available in my GitHub repository. Right now, I had to find a JDBC driver that let me access an Access database. Boy, that's been a while. And various other things. The fun part is, though, I wrote this program under Java 1.0 moving into 1.1. It was back in that day. Maybe some 1.2 stuff in there as well. But it's still running. I mean, it's running under Java. I'm currently running under 10. And it ran just fine. So the whole write once, run anywhere, the whole backward compatibility stuff still paid off. I couldn't believe it. Very impressive. Okay, so there was a picture of that. So, of course, what changed in my career hit everybody pretty much at the same time in the Java world. I tended to think of it as the Ruby on Rails meteor that hit the Java dinosaur world, you know. And we all had to react to that. It's like, oh, my goodness, suddenly they could build a web app in a very short amount of time that was very effective and powerful. And I already knew something about servlets and JSPs and things like that, but I tried to learn Ruby on Rails, and at the time, I was too heavily invested in the Java world. I didn't have the same background. I wasn't really able to figure that out. So instead, a year later, Grails came out. Now, if you don't know that story, basically, the people in the Groovy community said, how are we going to bring the Ruby on Rails productivity into the Java space? So they decided to use Groovy because it was another language that could do metaprogramming. It was a language you could write code that would write code, much like Ruby. And therefore, at first, they called it Groovy on Rails. And no less a person than DHH himself, David Hannemeyer Hansen, who created Ruby on Rails, said, no, you can't call it on Rails. You know, that's my framework. And of course, he's right. So they changed the name to Grails. And that's where that all started. As another aside, by the way, calling it Ruby on Rails is a decision that an American never, ever would have made. Because he basically was saying Ruby is powerful and let's do rapid, powerful development. And was thinking of the high-speed European trains when he went on Rails. Can you imagine doing Java on Amtrak? I mean, I was supposed to come here on Amtrak yesterday, and the trains broke down. I had to go to it. It was a mess. So, no, at any rate. So I got involved in Grails and then in Groovy. And, of course, it was still built on Java. And there was Spring and Hibernate and all these other open source projects that tied into it. And I was basically the target audience because I'd already been familiar with Ruby on Rails and wanted to learn the rest of this. So around 2007, I really started diving into Groovy. That was my first exposure to a non-Java language on the JVM. So again, as an app, just to try something out, I did this one called Groovy Baseball. Now, this is part of my Making Java Groovy book, and these are the risks, of course, of dealing with an open source service that may go away. I built this on top of box score information that's provided by Major League Baseball on a daily basis. They have a website where you could download this stuff. And I tried to access this about a couple of months ago, and suddenly part of it was blocked. You couldn't get at it. And again, nothing I did. It's just they decided not to give part of it away or something. I have no idea what. But I was able to rewrite it to get at it. So to give you a quick idea what this is like, that's this one here. If I execute this, now actually I'm going to use a plugin for Gradle called Greddy, which basically allows you to deploy a web app onto Jetty or Tomcat or even a cluster or what have you. And this one uses an H2 database for the locations of the stadiums for Major League Baseball, as well as, well, many other options here. So this will bring up the data, as you see, from yesterday's baseball games, or at least the ones that actually ran. And of course, we were rained out yesterday, right? So, but you can even click on it and see, actually it's not showing the mouse over. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it shows the score of the individual games, and it's all centered on the home stadium. So the idea here was to use a Google geocoder to encode all the latitudes and longitudes for the baseball stadiums and save them in an H2 database. I used H2 because this is part of a GitHub repository. I don't want you to have to set anything up in order to be able to run this. So it's all self-contained. You just download it, run the Gradle build, and it will go ahead and create the database, and it will go get the scores, and I can click on a different date, and it should go get the scores for that as well and replace them all, although there's some lag involved, and I don't want to wait for it. But at any rate, that's the idea. So that was a lot of fun building something like that. I think I sometimes have to click on it twice for reasons I don't understand. Yeah, well, it's code, you know. I did hear a clever, a Twitter joke. What did they say? A million monkeys on a million typewriters will eventually type a Java program, and the rest will be Perl programs. You know, so anyway, I thought it was funny. Okay, so this is running on Greddy, well, which is really running a Jetty server that's managed by Gradle. So it's a Greddy plugin for Gradle, and as I say, everything still works. It's working just fine. I just had to clean up that code. This code is in the GitHub repository, of course, and you're welcome to that whenever you like. Let me be sure to stop that, though. There we go. Okay. So it parsed you get XML or JSON data, whichever you prefer for the box score information, just pulling it down. Yeah, there's a picture of it. When I was writing the Making Java Groovy book, I wandered into Barnes & Noble. Remember when we used to have bookstores, you know, you could go around into? And I was looking around, and I noticed that there was only one shelf at the time called Computer, whereas unfortunately there were 3, I think, labeled Teen Paranormal Romance. And I was going to lament the state of the world and everything, and then I got an inspiration. I thought, no, actually, what this means is in order to sell my book, what I needed was some groovy vampires in the book. So I decided to go consume data from, first I looked at IMDb or whatever, but they didn't have an API. So instead I went to Rotten Tomatoes, and it turned out they had a public API with only GET requests. That's all it supported. But I could do queries on movie titles and topics and everything and pull down massive amounts of JSON data and then parse it. Now, that also gave me a chance to use a NoSQL database. So I put all the movie information inside a Mongo database because that was the native data structure, you know, in BSON and everything. And I was still heavily in the Groovy community, so I used Ratpack, which is a really nice, what we would today call a microservice framework. Very simple framework for building a RESTful web service. And I was going to show you that, and unfortunately what happened was Fandango apparently acquired Rotten Tomatoes, and now you have to become a, quote, partner to get access to the data anymore, and this was silly enough to begin with, so I haven't gone through that nightmare yet. But I've got the code and everything, and again, it was fun. It was an opportunity to play with a lot of these alternative technologies and do something. And I went to my local Barnes & Noble and said, hey, I'm a local author. Can you get a couple copies of my book, and I'll sign them and everything? And they went, okay. So they brought a couple in, and I signed them, and they just kind of sat there and sat there and sat there. And so eventually I took one of them, and I figured, okay, why not? And I put it over in the Teen Paranormal Romance section, you know, figuring, hey, it's got vampires in it. You know, I did actually do that app in the book and everything. And then I went by about a month later, and it was gone. And I thought, oh my goodness, did somebody actually buy this thing? And I went by the info desk, and of course somebody just moved it. It was gone. Who knows? You know, didn't sell. I don't have very high expectations on that stuff anymore. But I got a story out of it, so that was good. Now, late in the 2000s there, I wound up on the speaker tour, the No Fluff, Just Stuff speaker tour. We come to the Boston area a couple times a year, one up in Wakefield, one out in Framingham. And I got on that tour, and the person who did Android talks was not going to be on anymore, and the organizer asked me if I'd like to pick that up. And I was already interested in Android just because I was interested in mobile, and Android felt like Java. I mean, that was the idea. Now, whether it is Java or not, I'm not getting into that in here. I'm not an attorney, you know, and I don't want to get into any of that part. But, again, it gave me an opportunity to dig into a new area with Java as the baseline knowledge section that I could start from. Of course, nowadays it also supports Kotlin, another chance to get into an alternative JVM language. And what I did is I accessed something called ICNDB, the Internet Chuck Norris database. Now, yeah, you may not have heard of that one. That has a public API. And if I bring up my Android Studio app here, then I can show you that app. And what it basically does is it goes to this RESTful web service and downloads JSON data. And inside that, then it parses the joke out of it and then renders it inside an application. So if let me start up my emulator real quick here. Let's pick the Pixel 2. That sounds like a good one. And then I'll just show you this working. And this, again, was an opportunity to learn how to do asynchronous programming because you didn't want to lock up the GUI. Now, I'd done swing programming before, so I was familiar with the idea. You know, how do you get off the event dispatch thread and all of that. And then how to parse JSON data using a Java API. There's some really nice libraries, by the way, some really nice Java libraries that are available in Android that you can also use outside. Like there's one called Retrofit you may have heard of. Retrofit is an excellent Java library for doing accessing and parsing RESTful web services. You pass get, post, put, and delete requests. You convert it to a Java object, etc. So let me see if I can run this guy. Access that, and I'll just say run and continue anyway. And let's see. Oh, good. It figures that I've got an issue with it. Oh, I think I changed my APK or whatever. All right, well, it works, and it's actually in the Google Play Store, and I can point that out to you if you're interested. But I have a picture again. That's the beauty of this sort of thing. I'll show you the code, but I always have a backup. I used Brian Getz, of course. Brian Getz can spawn threads to complete before they're started, or can't test for equality because he has no equal, that sort of thing. So this little app, again, allows me to access a RESTful web service and convert the data to a Java class and then update a GUI with that. And it's got a little play button on it now and a little plus button. That will allow me to share a joke using SMS or whatever if I find a good one, all that kind of stuff. And it was all based on Android, which means eventually it was all based on Java, ultimately. One quick story about that, by the way. I wrote this app, and in fact, well, let me actually show you here. If I go to play.google.com, and I go inside the apps section, so let me let that load up a section. So here's the apps section, and I search on, well, Chuck Norris, I think will do it. Then you should see the app there. Actually, I think I need to change it. Let me try the ICNDB one. Yeah, there it is. And I put this there, and I was giving all these talks on the No Fluff Tour, and I called it the Internet Chuck Norris Database app because that's all it was doing. It's consuming data from a public website. And I put it in the Google Play Store just to demonstrate how to deploy, and of course all the data is in my GitHub repository. And about a week after I deployed it, I got an email from Patent Boggs LLP, that's this name here, the attorneys for Mr. Carlos Ray, quote, Chuck Norris. Did you know Chuck Norris's name is Carlos Ray Norris? I had no idea, you know. At any rate, they were upset that I was infringing on their intellectual property, although they couldn't say exactly how. I mean, again, I was consuming data from a public website and just rendering, I'm giving the code away. I didn't charge anything for this. Oh my goodness, like anybody pay anything for this. And they I ignored it. And a week later, Google disabled my app. They suspended it. And I'm like, whoa. And normally I'm much too much of a coward to do anything about that. But in this case, I got annoyed. So over a weekend, I converted it to the Internet Carlos Ray database, as you see here, and uploaded that. And I put the attorneys right in the logo, everything. I gave it a 5-star review, but I did that. There's a couple of decent reviews, actually, at best Carlos Ray app ever, or definitely unlike any other Carlos Ray app, So it's been sitting there for a couple of years now, and I have, tens of users or something like that? So you're welcome to it whenever you like. Of course, I'd made the one mistake you can't make, which is I lost the key. You sign it using the jar signer and store it in a key tool and everything, and again, it was a hard drive crash. I lost the key, so I can't update it anymore. It would think it was a new app, but it's all in my GitHub repository. You're welcome to it at any time, so just mentioning that. Okay. Still haven't heard anything from the attorneys again, so I think I'm okay. Now, at the time, I was the only person on the No Fluff Tour that was speaking on both Gradle and Android. So the people from Gradle Incorporated approached me about writing a book for O'Reilly, a recipes book on Gradle, for Android specifically. So I wrote that one in 2016, so it was just a couple of years ago. And worked on that. It started a couple years before that. These things always take way more time than you expected. The plan was just to give it to Gradle, and they would give it away. And if by some freak chance you are, in fact, interested in that book, I have a link here. If you just go to gradle.org/books and give them an email address, you could download the PDF for free or whatever, which tells you mostly you don't want me negotiating your next contract. I agreed to a royalty on a book I knew they were going to give away. So, at any rate, but that's there if you're interested in it. So then I had this thought. It's like, wow, I just wrote a recipes book for O'Reilly. How hard could it be to write another recipe book for O'Reilly? Because after all, that's when Java 8 came out. And even though it had been out, it really started to make an impact a couple of years ago. And a lot of people needed to transition to using streams and lambdas and method references. And even just the fact that we've got the java.time package is awesome now, And therefore, I thought, I'll write a book on that. And that's how the Modern Java Recipes book came about. Incidentally, if you're interested in the economics of technical book publishing, if you were to buy my book, I can buy a cup of coffee, but not at Starbucks. Okay? That's roughly the amount of money we're talking about here. If you divide by the number of hours you spend writing it, it probably goes negative and everything. So, but at any rate, that gave me a chance to dive back into Java. So after all these years of being in Groovy and the associated technologies and Android and still keeping touch with Java, this was my chance to get back in for real and dive in that way. And that was a lot of fun. So I got to get into the static and default methods and interfaces. I put some stuff with completable futures in there. Finally, after all these years, a chance to really learn some of the concurrency stuff that I should have learned from Brian Getz's book years ago. It's a chance to dig into that, the optional class, etc. And what I did at the time is I created a repository. Let me load that up. Let me switch this to Java 8 recipes. I loaded a repository for the Java 8 part, and I made a separate repository for the Java 9 stuff. Because the idea was that the Java 9, well, the plan was the book was going to be out long before Java 9 was released, and that's how that worked out. So I needed at least a chapter on Java 9, and I added that. And there's only a couple things I want to show you in here that are amusing. One is that, let me mention that java.time business. Here is, I think I have a picture over here. Let me show you the picture first. Yeah, you see this picture? They say you can tell a developer by whispering in their ear the word time zones and watching a shudder go right down their spine, okay? This is the set of time zones in Antarctica, just to give you an idea. I mean, how scary is that? And yet the funny part doesn't even jump out at you at first. Here's the funny part. You see the South Pole here? Is in a hashed region. This region is known as the Ross dependency, and it follows the time zone rules for New Zealand. And basically, more or less. But what this means is that the South Pole, 6 months of darkness followed by 6 months of daylight, is on daylight savings time. Believe it or not. And I wanted to prove that. Now, there was a nice little demo in, actually, it was a separate one. Let me just show you here. Here is my Antarctica time zones program using streams and lambdas and Java, the java.time package. So I make a local date time, actually, and then the zone ID class has that great method called getAvailableZoneIDs. And when I turn that into a stream, that gives me a stream of strings. Those are all region IDs. Like one of the things I learned, of course, many of you may already be aware, there's no such thing as Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time according to the ISO 8601 spec. Instead, we are in, and I hate to say it this way, America/New York. I'd rather be in America/Boston, right? I mean, again, I'm in Connecticut, so New York to me that's an illegal state exception, you know? It's dark, it's dirty, it's full of Yankee fans. You understand, you know. Any rate, the getAvailableZoneIDs method returns these strings representing the region IDs from all over the world. When I did this in Java 8, there were like 600 of them. I'm sure there are more now. So I turn them into a stream, and I filter them such that the string contained the word Antarctica, because all the Antarctic ones had that word in it. And then the map method allowed me to convert the strings into zone IDs. I'm using the of method on the zone ID class as a method reference. So now I have a stream of zone IDs, and then by applying @zone on the current local date time, I'm now putting it in that particular time zone. So there's a stream of zone date times, and the reason I did that is because then I could get an offset in total seconds and use the sorted method with comparing ints. This is a static import in the comparator class. That allows me to sort the time zones by their number of seconds offset from GMT. So I collected them all, and then I print out the offset, the zone, and is daylight savings time or not. Nice little method there. And when I execute this, what I see, make that bigger, is yes, indeed. Oh, the South Pole went off of daylight savings time. Last time I ran this, they were on daylight savings time. So it's probably right about when we went on, they went off on that sort of thing. But you see how easy it is to do a program like this once you have the java.time package available to you. So there's lots of little neat demos like that. Again, mostly it's, well, partly at least, it's an illustration of my own sense of humor. So sorry about that, but whatever. Okay, there's that one if you're interested. Now, of course, I have to more or less finish on cat pictures, right? I mean, that's why the internet was invented. And there is a RESTful web service available from Flickr that is a Flickr photo search. Now, I say it's sort of a RESTful web service because any REST advocate I know would be appalled by this. Do you know what those REST advocates call themselves, by the way? Have you heard that term? They call themselves Restafarians. I know, that shows way more sense of humor than those people normally demonstrate, you know? I mean, they will argue you into the ground over what is and is not a RESTful web service. In fact, once I used SOAP just to avoid that argument, to say nobody's going to tell me whether or not this is SOAPful, you know? But at any rate, the reason they wouldn't like Flickr's web service is because it actually has the verb in the name. Its photo search is a parameter. You know, and of course, you're not supposed to have anything other than the HTTP verbs, et cetera, et cetera. But if I didn't want to, log in or anything, I did have to go through the registration at Yahoo, so that was painful. But if I didn't want to log in, then I could just do a GET request on the photo search and download the JSON data. And using Groovy, I could use a swing builder to build up the swing UI, but I could use Java 8 with parallel streams, or 9 or 10. And in fact, that's what I want to show you here. This is my, let's make this full screen here. I call it concurrent kitties, but it's parallel kitties here. In Groovy, I've got a file with my Flickr key in it, and this is, I'm going to search the Flickr photos search using that key, get back JSON data, and I just want to see 6 photos. So this is Groovy speak for downloading taking these parameters in this map here and converting it into a query string. See, this converts each key value pair into key equals value and then joins them with an ampersand. And then this converts it to a URL and then downloads the JSON data. So I write the JSON data to a file, and then I pretty print it, you'll see it. And then Groovy has this class called a JSON slurper, if you will, that lets you dig into the JSON data without having to map it to classes. That's what you'd normally do in Java. So you'd have to map it to classes. So I parse it and I dig into the photo elements, and here's where I go parallel, is that I convert to a parallel stream. This is using a Groovy method, but it's using the underlying Java 8 streams here. And what happens is in the response you get back, you get parameters like farm and server and ID and secret, and you use those to build up the actual link to the image. Because the top-level JSON doesn't have a link to the image in it. It just has these pieces of it. So I synthesize the image and do the download in parallel. So I can download all 6 pictures at the same time and then render my little swing builder with the cat pictures. Now I'm going to run this, but I have to warn you, I don't know what I'm going to get back. Okay? It's the latest 6 pictures at Flickr that are tagged with the word kitties. Now, I did cat once, and I got back tractors. And I'm like, tractor? Oh, caterpillar. I get it, you know. But I've gotten dogs. I've gotten monkeys. You know, I'll simply say if I get something completely inappropriate, I will close it right away, all right? But just warning you. So let me run this, and you'll see, oh, by the way, that illegal reflective access, oh, hey, I got cats. Okay, I put that one in the win column. But you see how fast that was, because it downloaded all the cat pictures in parallel. You know, I did this for a Java 1 conference as a Groovy and Java 8 talk there, and you see how that worked out. And again, all the code's in a GitHub repository if you're interested in it. You know, it works just fine. So that's the cat pictures one, or actually more properly, it was the parallel kitties one, if you're interested. Now, the future, of course, Java 10 has come out, and we've got, of course, modularization from Java 9 and above. We've got the collection factory methods. Of course, the big hot topic these days is reactive streams. Java 9 has the interfaces in it, but not an implementation. I've been playing with the Spring framework-related one, reactive streams, or the project reactor implementation of the reactive stream spec, etc. Also, we have our local variable type inference and everything. And, of course, there's lots more. So to do one last thing, I wanted to give away those books, as I mentioned. And let's see, where's my picture here? Let's make this bigger. And this gives me, as I mentioned, an excuse to use JShell. So when I say JShell here and I say open, I made a class called person.java, and I can list it, and you'll see, thank you. And then here's my class. I really wanted to put the var type in there, but of course, as you know, right, I'm assuming you know, local variable is serious. You can only put var on local variables, and those are attributes. So I lost my opportunity to put var in there, even though this is running on Java 10. But I'm going to generate row, column, and side. The side is like, I'll make this side as 1 and that side is 2, just arbitrarily. And then the rows start at the front and go back, and I think, what did we say? There were 10 rows, is that right? 12 rows, thank you. And there were 10 seats on each side, so 10 columns here. So I just put it in the toString method. So if I just say new person, that gave me on this side over here, and it got to make you walk. So it's way back in the 11th row and the 10th column. You can measure the columns from either side, whatever you like. And if there's an empty seat there, just give it to somebody nearby, you know. I want to reserve one book for a woman in computer science, woman or unrepresented minority, but I know we've got the Women in Technology luncheon coming up, so make sure that we give one book at least to somebody who's going to go to the luncheon or something. Actually, we could just do that right offhand. If you're going to that luncheon, could you just raise your hand or somebody? And feel free to pick somebody there. Thank you. Okay, so at any rate, there was one book, and then I've got 2 more, right? So, okay, on this side, 5 rows back, 9 seats in, whatever that is. It gave me an excuse to use JShell. You know, I'm still looking for a reason to really use that very much, although I imagine I'll use it in tutorials and stuff. Last one, you're all set? Giving her a chance to get her exercise. So the last one, again, is on this side, 2nd row, 2nd person in, or somebody nearby there, and there you go. So that's everything. The conclusion I have really is that Java has basically been the soundtrack to my career change. You know, it's the thing in the background that's been running the whole time whenever I got into computer science. And even when I went off into so-called affiliated technologies, alternative JVM languages, Groovy, Kotlin, what have you, Java's always been there. And everything I've done in that it's always been the friendly home to go back to. And when the functional capabilities came out in Java 8, that gave me an excuse to really dive back in. And now one thing I want to mention about 10, by the way, I don't know if you're aware, I have my Java 8 repository, my Java 9 repository, and I can run a Gradle build on those. The biggest difference that happened when I ran the Gradle build on Java 10, other than the complaint about the illegal reflective access in Groovy, which is just a warning, you can ignore that, is it ran so fast, I had to verify it ran at all. I couldn't believe how much faster the Gradle build ran under Java 10. It ran 150 tests and everything in under 2 seconds. I mean, it's not a huge repository, certainly not by open source standards, but it was fast to me, and certainly a lot faster than 8 was, and things like that. So I'm looking forward to the new changes. I'm very happy to be here. My GitHub repository is at github.com/my last name, K-O-U-S-E-N, and then I have a whole series of repos there. If you need any further information, just send me an email, and I can reply, or contact me on Twitter. And I'll just say, enjoy the conference. Thank you very much for coming.
Great. Thank you so much, Ken. That was fantastic. Really appreciate the talk. I've never learned so much about bingo, Jeopardy, the Red Sox, Antarctica time zones, and what was the last thing? Parallel cats, right? So thank you so much. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce the next speaker. Siddharth Agarwal is the Vice President of Product Strategy for the Oracle Cloud Platform. And he's going to come up and talk about a number of new developer trends and cutting-edge developer topics. So thanks. Great. Welcome, Siddharth.
Thanks a lot, Rex. Good morning. Yes, you know, it's cold out there. I thought this is spring, but it doesn't feel like spring. I'm coming from California. I flew in last night. It took me a little longer to fly in. And talking about flying, they seem to be sending me to cold places on a regular basis. Because a few weeks ago, I was flying into Oslo, and we were landing, and the pilot announces it's -6 degrees and freezing fog has rolled in. And I was, okay, what does that mean? He's like, well, we're going to try landing, but if we don't make it this time, we have 45 more minutes of fuel to keep trying. So I was like, what happens after? But hopefully it's not that cold out here. So, so I'm going to talk a little bit about features. So I just have to say this, don't make your purchase decisions based on anything I say, but most of the stuff that we're going to talk about is there today. So, you know, it's an exciting time to be a developer, following up on what Ken had said around Java 10, et cetera. But one, serverless programming is becoming really popular, which is how do you spin up instances on demand. But as you think about these, you know, you now have to think about distributed programming. You have to think about taking events off. You have to think about how to synchronize the data storage, et cetera. Chatbots, you know, now bots are becoming really, really, you know, the buzzword out there as the user interface. But as you think about bots, you have to think about natural language processing. You have to think about AI, maintaining the state and context of a conversation. So it's becoming hard for developers. DevOps has been wonderful. It has improved our productivity significantly. But now what we're finding is that developers are spending 40 to 60% of their time in just doing DevOps, setting up Jenkins, setting up, you know, the various parts of a CI/CD pipeline, figuring out how to get Kubernetes going, et cetera. How do we move towards NoOps, where you get the benefits of DevOps, but with less work done by the developer, so the developer can focus more on writing code? Blockchain, you know, everyone's talking about blockchain. Not everyone knows what blockchain is. And the key thing is which use cases in production will actually result in value for the business organization. That's really important to figure out before we go start implementing Hyperledger. Open source is wonderful. Lots of innovation going on in open source. When we think about Kubernetes, which is used for orchestration, Kubernetes releases every 6 weeks. How do you upgrade Kubernetes? How do you set up Kubernetes? How do you scale Kubernetes? Getting etcd in front of Kubernetes for high availability, et cetera. You end up spending a lot of time doing that just so you can write your programs that can run in containers that might give you portability or that might give you better functionality. So how do we reduce the work effort there for developers? And then the last one is machine learning. Today, if I didn't mention AI and machine learning, then my talk would absolutely be useless. So let's talk about machine learning. The key thing for developers is, one, how do you get the platform to give you AI built in? And two, how can you embed machine learning into your applications without necessarily being a data scientist, without needing to understand machine learning, and making it very domain specific? So these are some of the things that we're going to talk about is how do we make the life of developers easy as we go down this path. And I'm not going to talk that much about the Oracle Cloud Platform, but we have a platform where you can develop your applications written in any programming languages, deploy them, run them, scale them based on containers. We have the ability to integrate SaaS applications to SaaS applications, SaaS to on-prem, and on-prem to on-prem applications. So as you're writing your custom applications, how do you integrate those applications, other pieces of packaged applications that are there, to be able to publish your content, to be able to secure the content, to be able to analyze and predict. So how in your applications can you embed functionality so you can be looking at data, analyzing data, and being able to help your users of your applications be able to predict. And finally, security, security and manageability. How can you monitor and manage from the cloud without needing to worry about installing monitoring and management tools and aggregating log data, performance data, user experience data without worrying about where that stuff is stored, and securing, making sure there's single sign-on, et cetera. So that's the Oracle Cloud Platform. But before I get into the demos that I wanted to show, which was around serverless and functions and blockchain, we did have an interesting announcement, and that's around GraalVM. So with that, I'd love to welcome Eric Sedler, who runs engineering for Graal. Eric?
Thanks.
Let's talk a little bit about Graal. So first, what is Graal? Not everyone knows what Graal is.
Okay, so thanks. So Graal is a multilingual, embeddable, efficient language virtual machine. And so the vision that we have for this project, we've been working on in the labs for about 7 years now, is that you write your code once in whatever language you want, and then you can use it in any application written in any other language and run it in whatever engine you want to. So you can run it in Java Hotspot, you can run it in Node, you can run it in MySQL or the Oracle database, or you can just run it standalone in a container. It's already in production in some Oracle products like OPA, but the big public website that we're on is on Twitter. So all the tweets that you're tweeting on during this conference are going through GraalVM today. And wow, there are a lot more things in progress.
No, so what about Graal makes it special that makes Twitter use Graal? What's the underlying architecture around Graal?
So the architecture for Graal is one where rather than designing the language runtime specifically for a particular language, like designing it for Java or for JavaScript, we designed it kind of one level meta. So it's running things that run languages. And it's kind of a part of a larger trend in the history of virtualizing software. And one of the reasons that we've done that is to have this idea that Java introduced back in the 90s of write once, run anywhere. And what that actually meant was what I'll call hardware level virtualization. It means you can run your app on any processor regardless of the ISA. And that was what Java tried to do. And then Microsoft came along with CLR. And then there's a next step in virtualization that you'd see with VirtualBox or VMware or whatever, where you can run your app on any operating system regardless of what you had installed on the hardware. And that was another level of convenience. But today, if you write your code in Java and then you want to put your Fortran app on it or vice versa, like Ken does, you're kind of in trouble. We actually would allow Ken to do that because you can run Fortran on our LLVM interpreter and then run a Ruby front end or a JavaScript front end or a Java front end on it. And so what Graal does is it watches the interpreters, which have taken the front ends of all these different languages. We ported them to our API, and then what Graal does is it watches what the API does, learns the language semantics, and then generates a compiler for it. And all that stuff can be linked together with zero cost overhead to go between languages. And you can make any memory structure so foreign objects can look like the native local objects to avoid an allocate and copy. And then all that stuff can run in any of the engines I mentioned there along the bottom. And standalone, you can compile ahead of time, which gives you fast startup and low footprint rather than running another VM.
Well, no, it sounds pretty cool, pretty awesome, but I'm not sure that we should sell this on the basis of it can run Fortran for you.
Yeah. Well, you know, I tried to tie it into the earlier keynote here, right?
No, that's good. That's wonderful. Very creative. And where should people go to see, you know, what's going on with Graal?
Well, so Graal is actually one of the, it's a big community effort, so it was built on the open. There, you can see here.
And stay close to the mic, please.
Oh yeah. So I don't know if this is going to work. No, the pointer is not.
No, just point here.
Oh, point here.
And put it in this little dot here.
There. Okay, great. 24,000 commits, right? And we've got 73 contributors on GitHub, so it's actually a pretty big project at GitHub. And we've had commits from a number of vendors, like a dozen universities and some individuals as well. So it's been done in the community. You can see what we're doing as we're making commits. And you can try this out running any of the languages that are supported by the JVM, but also supporting all the Node languages, or JavaScript stuff. And you can run these things in the database. We released that last fall. Or you can run it in MySQL. We'll talk more about that next week at Percona Live, which is the big open source database conference. And we just launched like a few minutes ago, GraalVM.org. We have a lot of documentation and downloads there. And then when you get something running, you can debug this stuff with Java tools like NetBeans, but you could use JavaScript tools like Chrome, and it'll work on any of the GraalVM languages. And please join us, on GitHub if you want to help commit, or come to the website and see more about it.
That's wonderful, Eric. Thank you so much for being here. And this sounds pretty cool. This whole thing of write once, run anywhere. Now it's like write anything in any language and run anywhere. So that's wonderful. Thanks a lot, Eric. And by the way, Eric, the performance on Twitter, what was the improvement in performance on Twitter?
Oh, thank you. It's 11% faster. The open source version of Graal is 11% faster for Twitter than it is with the previous version of the JVM.
Yeah, so Eric said 11% faster. On Twitter, the performance is 11% faster, and that's why they're using GraalVM. So if you want to drive for better performance and you have scale of workload, that's a good alternative. So no more pressing off that circle button for you. Okay, great. So GraalVM.org. So with that, let's get into what we wanted to share with you about serverless functions, etc. We're going to work on this scenario of selling a car. And I happened to be walking in the Oracle parking lot and took the photo of Larry Ellison's car. He has a particular spot. And actually, there is a security guard that is watching. So if you ever park there, within about 30 seconds, someone will be on you saying that's not your spot. It's a Lexus LFA. So it's a pretty expensive car. And so I said, hey, why not try and sell that car? Now, don't tell him I actually sold the car. Otherwise, I might not have a job after this keynote here. So, and someone loved cartoons. So here's the cartoon of the scenario that we're going to walk through. So if you go through the various stages of this, first, I'm going to show you a bot that's actually going to put his car for sale on a blockchain. I'm going to show you how a chatbot is built. So the interaction paradigm for the selling of the car and the buying of the car is done via bots, chatbots, on Facebook Messenger. So I'm going to show how that is built. And then we're going to have chatbot creating Carfax requests, putting the car onto the blockchain, et cetera, using serverless functions-based calls. So we're going to walk through. Matt Baldwin is going to come up and talk through functions. And then finally, we're going to look up on the blockchain as to what cars are available and be able to buy the Lexus MFA. So that's the scenario. So and this is the architecture, which is not cartoonish, though it does have some cartoon elements to it. I'll show you in a second. But so the customer, that's me, is selling my car. That's the Lexus MFA. And we used the chatbot platform from Oracle as part of the mobile cloud to be able to interface with the customer. And then the part in the middle, I can use this guy here. This guy here is an event-based Kafka engine that we built. And then finally, you have functions-based development. So you have serverless programming. And then this car, there's the cartoon part. This car is then put onto the blockchain network. That's the one in the middle. And then from the blockchain network, we're able to purchase the car also. So a different dealership is able to, for a different customer, enable them to buy the car. So that's the experience out there. So let me just show you what the experience looks like here. Let me just go to my mobile phone, if you guys can plug this in. So here we go. Can you guys see my iPhone? If the folks can put up my iPhone here. The folks in the front or the back, my iPhone, please. Ah, there we go. OK. And yes, I have a few emails to read. Please do not comment on that. People wonder if I'm doing work or not. But let's go to Facebook Messenger here. So this is just me going to Facebook Messenger. And here I friended John's car dealership. And I just say hi to wake up the bot here. So this is just no education needed on my part, no read the manual, no book needed. And here it says, welcome, Siddharth. Are you interested in buying or selling? I want to sell Larry's Lexus MFA. That's great. We offer competitive prices for clients. So it knows who I am. So can you upload an image? So I go in here. I go to my thing. Looks like I've taken a lot of photographs of his license plate. Not sure why, but here we go. It's asking for a license plate. So now it's doing optical character recognition on the license plate. Can you upload recent pictures of the car? And here's the actual picture of the car. And this is his actual spot. That's right in front of the 500 building. That's his actual car. So that's why I'm a little worried doing this demo. But OK, it's already done some parsing, figured out some details. I'm going to look at a few more details out here. So it's gone, look up maybe Carfax report or something, got some information, navigation system, 7 speakers. That looks wonderful. And the mileage, so let me see, is this correct? I say yes. And the one thing that it asks me is what's the mileage on the car, because I can't get that necessarily. Now, I generally drive between 150 miles to 180 miles, and I can only do that on the 280 close to San Francisco between 2 and 4 a.m. on the night. So I don't really drive that much. So that's 1,100 miles so far. It says, oh, so it's looked up Kelley Blue Book and says, Kelley Blue Book values the price of your car to be $375,000 today. And since it's great condition, I'll buy it for $385,000. That's kind of a bummer because these cars are supposed to appreciate in value, and I thought it was supposed to be $425,000 and I'd be making some money. But oh well, $385,000, what's another $15,000, $20,000 when you can buy cars like this? So I say, is this OK with you? Yes. So there, we'll continue to process the vehicle and send you the documents for the transfer. So that's the kind of interface that can be built. And we will need this a bit more later. But let me just put this here for now. So talking about, if we can go back to the slides, please. There's a pretty significant transformation that is happening. We're moving forward from the app era. Everyone was building mobile apps, but now chatbots and messaging are becoming the key form of interaction with embedded AR, VR capabilities in there. So image recognition is built in as you're doing chatbots, and virtual personal assistants are going to be taking over. If you think about your mobile phone, what's the most popular app on your phone? I have 2 kids. My daughter's almost 17. I was actually in Boston just 2-3 weeks ago showing her colleges out here. And I have a son who's 13 and a half. They live by their phones, but they don't have voicemail set up. How many of you have kids? Yeah, and how many of them have phones? Pretty much everyone. And how many of them have voicemail set up? No one. So they don't use voicemail. Email. They only get to email if I force them to use email by saying, you have to go look at that because it's something important from school. The way they all communicate is messaging, either Facebook Messenger, Instagram, Snapchat, iMessage, etc. So the paradigm of conversations is moving towards using AI. And when you think about if you wanted to build that kind of a bot interface, what are some of the challenges that you have? One, there are lots of channels there. There are 2 sets of channels. One is the input channel, which can be Alexa, Google Home, etc. The other is the app platform upon which you're working, which is Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, WeChat. So you now have to integrate with Alexa. You have to integrate with Facebook Messenger. And then you have to have natural language processing. What did the person say? You have to understand the intent of what was being said. So you have to use AI techniques in there. And then you have to have security, back-end integration. So for example, I might be needing to go to some back office applications to get some information on maybe the policy or insurance capabilities of the car, et cetera. So there's a lot of work that developers have to do. And so how do we make it simple? And this is actually, I've done the demo here of the chatbot. What we did was we built a platform to be able to help developers to build the chatbots easily. So first, we built the integrations into Alexa, Google Home, et cetera, so that we're able to take the voice to text. They give us text. And then we've got a natural language processing engine. And that natural language processing engine goes in and understands what happened, what was the intent of the conversation, and then what are the entities upon which that we need to act on. For example, here an entity might be the type of car that we're working on. So we built that. And then you saw the interface. I was able to load in cars and things like that. And if I were to say, show me all the cars available for sale, it would use the Facebook Messenger card layout look and feel. So we've even integrated into the UI of the messaging platform, so you as a developer don't have to worry about this. And then we've got deep learning algorithms that are built in so that we're maintaining the state of the conversation. What did the person say? Did they say something that indicates that they might have reached a decision? Or is the tone of the conversation heading south, in which case we should transfer that conversation over to the customer service rep, right? So that's all been built into the platform so that you can build these bots pretty easily. And I'm going to switch to the UI of how to build bots. So let me just go in here. So browser, where's the browser? Matt, where's the browser? Here we go. OK, let me make sure that we're logged in here. So this is the mobile cloud from Oracle. And this is the bot piece of that. So here, for example, you can see from mobile cloud, you can build mobile apps, native mobile apps with mobile backend as services like push notifications, storing securely on local drives, et cetera. You have the ability to build visually developed apps where without writing a single line of code, you could write a mobile app that can run natively, run as mobile web, et cetera. You can build bots. That's what we're going to spend time on. You can do analytics. You can get insight into how the application is being used, whichever application it is, whether it be a bot, whether it be a native mobile app, et cetera. So let's go to the bot here. And I'm going to go to the car dealer buy bot. So these are bots that I'd built. And here you can see there's notion of intent. And as a developer, what you're doing is you're asking the business user, what are some of the intents that you have? So here, the intents that maybe people put in was buy a car, I'm looking for a car, I want to buy a car. Now, there's no way that you can put in all the intents. And so that is where we're using machine learning. So here, for example, we've got different models for machine learning that are built in here that can be used to train this bot. So let's play around with this bot a little bit. And here, I want to see, I want to test the intent, like buy Lexus. Okay? Now, here you see there is no notion of Lexus. But when I say buy Lexus here and I say send, this is actually in the build environment. So I'm testing what this looks like. It actually comes back and tells me, here's the confidence with which intent was the person trying to execute on. So buy car is the intent with 30%. And if, for example, I want this buy Lexus to be added in here, I can add that as an example, which then results in retraining the bot such that the confidence level is going up. And if you had a number of conversations that you'd already recorded your customer conversations, you could actually stream those customer conversations in, and we'd be able to learn from the bot. And if we went here, and if we said, this shows you what the response would be to an end user if they were interacting with this bot. If I said buy a car, now it's actually executing the code that shows you what the response would be, right? And here, this is the interface that is showing you. If you were doing it on Facebook, it would look different. So you have the notion of intents that we figured out based on just some hints that you've given, and then we keep on learning on an ongoing basis. And then we have the notion of entities. So entities are address, currency, date, et cetera. These are system entities that we've created so that from the conversation, we can pull out things like address or currency. You know, if you're doing a bank account transfer and you say, pay mom $50, and you'd ask, you know, before, what's my balance in checking, we no longer ask you which account you want to transfer from, and we're able to pull out $50 as currency out here. But you can add your own custom, you know, entities also. So in this case, you know, I've got dealer as a custom entity, and here I could add, for example, name. So based on which dealer, you know, you might have different dealers that you're working on, okay? And then what we've done is we've created these bundle packs, resource bundles. So we already have multilingual natural language processing in there. But if you have a better way to process, you have a resource bundle that you want to use, you can integrate that resource bundle in here. And we've also got here the ability to have custom components. So in this case, if you wanted optical character recognition, and you wanted to integrate optical character recognition in here, through a webhook, you can actually call a particular you know, OCR package that you have. And then here you can see the channels that are available to you. So for example, here's the Facebook channel. And we're already enabling secure single sign-on, three-legged OAuth, et cetera, for you, so making it really easy. And then we're also giving you the ability to use webhooks to add other channels. So the goal of this was to show you that as a developer, it becomes very easy to be able to actually build these bots. And we're giving you a visual drag-and-drop paradigm of how to lay out what the conversation might look like based on what kind of decisions made by the engine, what you might want to happen, right? Like buying the car or putting the car on a blockchain. So here's the overview of our platform. One, we're giving you cross-channel integration across both Slack, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Siri, et cetera, plus on the voice input side with Google Home Alexa. Dialog flow execution. So you have a declarative builder, which I showed you. You're building the bot declaratively as opposed to writing a whole bunch of code, and it has a state machine built in. So for example, if I was looking for a new laptop to purchase as an employee, and I saw the 3 laptops, and then I said, yeah, I'm done with this view, it knows to ask me, well, have you made a decision? Because it's maintaining the state of the conversation. And then it has the conversational AI engine in, which is using machine learning to be able to learn on an ongoing basis. And really importantly, it also has integration to backend. So we make it very easy for you to be able to integrate with backend SaaS applications, back office on-prem applications, with making very simple API calls, and we do the integration with the backend. So with that, I'd love to bring Matt on to talk about serverless functions. Matt?
Thank you.
Where does serverless fit into this whole paradigm here?
Well, it's actually kind of, actually we'll go to the next slide, kind of where it fits in. Where it fits in, Siddhartha, is that where we have this Kafka event engine that actually is kicking off events, and then we have these serverless functions acting as almost like microservices or nanoservices talking to the blockchain architecture. And so that we can talk to it and spin up something really quickly and then tear it back down really quickly. So it gives us scalability as we add more dealers and more participants and organizations to the solution.
Great.
So let's kind of kick off into what is serverless. And so what is serverless is, yes, let's lay it down flat, is that there are servers there. Okay, everyone, there's servers there, and lots of servers actually. But what's important about serverless is that you don't have to manage the cruft underneath. You're just writing code, you're building things, and the serverless components are all being managed for you. And so that is important for a variety of different reasons. And what we're going to talk about today is about functions as a service, and really functions where as a component, it's really the kind of the runtime, the infrastructure that we'll be talking about underneath. So why serverless? Why do we have it? And so first of all, it's just very simple. It's cheaper. Because if you're looking at a traditional application, say you stand up a Jetty server, Tomcat server, when you stand that up, you then run that for a period of time, and you're constantly running it. And there's a cost associated to that. What we can do from an economics perspective is that we can say, let's just run that function for a moment and then move on and then tear it down. Bring it up and tear it down. For example, we can also make it hot, so it can be up for a little bit and then torn down after a period of time. The next point is agility. Agility is key when we're building new applications. How we want to reduce the amount of code that we're actually developing, and we want to be able to not introduce errors into the code that we're building. And then reliability is that we're not managing the service. We can offload that management of that service to the cloud provider. And so that gives us reliability, the patching. We don't have to deal with operating system updates or patches or any of those things. And then finally, innovation. If I can write code and kind of think at the speed of light, where I can innovate faster and I can compose applications in a much more efficient manner and deliver overall value to the business much quicker. So it was announced in Oracle Open World 2017 is the fnproject.io. And what the fnproject.io is an open source project. It's tied to the CNCF, the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. And what it is an open source project that delivers functions as a service, where you can deploy this capability on premise, and then we'll be offering a functions as a service capability as a managed service as well. But the key thing here is that you can get started today building functions that are portable. And with the underlying technology being containers, and it's just a really exciting project, because when we look at, we have 50 committers now, 50 plus Oracle, non-Oracle committers to the project, so it's a very active and dynamic project. And there's also 2,500 commits, actually 2,500 plus commits that have actually been committed to the project as well. This is very exciting, great investment, and really kind of gets you going and thinking about how to build functions, and with multiple languages as well. So let's look at what is a function. So functions, the function project takes the basic concept from 30 years or 40 years ago when we were building Unix streams in and out, very simple. So you put something in, the black box, that function, and then something comes out. And so then we have basic output to standard out, and then logging to error. The function server and the function service handles everything else, like the API gateway, piping things about, storing calls, logs. It takes care of all that cruft underneath. So it's a very simple, very elegant solution in terms of how you're going to build that nano service underneath a microservice. And then when we start looking at the CLI is very straightforward. FN init creates an app. It builds a scaffolding for an app. In this case, FN at runtime go, FN run, FN test, FN deploy, FN call, and then we basically build routes. Everything when it's deployed is a REST service. So all you have to do is be able to say, okay, FN deploy, and then that route comes forward. But really kind of enough of that. Let's kind of walk into some of the code. So
effectively, this is really portable across multiple environments. You can run it on your laptop, you can run it in our public cloud, you can run it in a third-party cloud, and you're not just locked into running everything in one cloud, right?
Correct, absolutely, correct. And let's do runtime. Typing is good. By the way, this is pair programming. I'm one pair, you guys are the other pair, so you can always help me if you want. And runtime go, and we'll call it hello. So what we did there is we built a basic scaffold of a function. So we'll cd to it. And what you see are three artifacts, really, three key artifacts. The service itself, the actual function itself, func.go, func.yaml, and test.json. So let's take a quick look at these. And let's look at that func.do. Let's make this a little bigger. I mean, nothing really special, but what it is doing is using basic standard in, standard out. So you can see right here saying we're looking for the person name, and guess what? It's a hello world kind of capability. And then the func.yaml actually defines what language it's going to be, where the entry point is, and then the test, we also build a basic testing for a black box testing on the environment as well. So let's go back to here. So the basic, simplest thing we can do is function run. And what it's doing here is it's basically building a container, and then it uses that container and says, hello world. Awesome. But now let's see what's actually, so for those who are doing verbose, here's what it's actually doing under the covers. So in other words, it's doing all the things in terms of building, in terms of using and leveraging a container, but you don't see any of it. So for those of you who are interested in doing something like this, right, like I'm using a MacBook, you can do a brew install fn, and you'll get the function development kit, and so it's part of brew, so you can use that. So now let's try something, because we said, what is it, standard in, standard out kind of thing. So let's do echo, and let's call it like this. Let's write some JSON, and we'll call it that, and we'll call it Boston Strong.
Yeah.
There we go. And there. And then we will pipe it to fn run. Now with all luck, it's going to build the image here and say fn, and then fn run. Oops, what did I do? I must have an error here. There. There we go. It was just an error. Come on, I need your help a little bit here, guys. You can give me a hand here. So, okay, so that's actually building that. But then we want to actually do something more with this. This is running inside of my development environment. See, it's very elegant, very straightforward. We just manipulate the Go code. We can run function start and function run and build right just like that. And we can even do a function test, for example, like that.
We need to speed it up a little bit.
And we'll do a function test, and it's running the test cases. And then we can then say, okay, so let's actually deploy this. So do deploy .app demo hello. Okay. App demo local. Okay, function deploy demo. Okay, just make sure I got this right. App demo. There. Okay, so what's doing here is that's actually building a new container. And what it's doing is then publishing it to a service, so we can say function apps list. There. So now we have demo deployed, code deployed, and then what we can then say is we can say routes list demo. And see, that's the endpoint, because now we have a routable endpoint that we can use. And so now we can say curl, right? And we can say curl, and we'll say HTTP. And my mouse is somewhere here. And we can see that. And so we can also, so that's actually deployed on a server. It could be deployed as function as a service, server as well, from function as a service. And it can be deployed. And we can pipe things in and out of it just like we did, like we did before. So that's the basic concept of what function is from a CLI perspective. So let's go back to the presentation, because when we're looking at more complex things, we want to be able to provide some level of orchestration for those functions. So, and particularly for longer running type of functions, and want to do additional parallelisms. So what we've done is then we've leveraged the completable API from Java 8, and to allow us to build these parallel functions, and so that you can build some very complex orchestrations. So, for example, your boss comes up to you and says, sell car is kind of the microservice, but it actually has a variety of things underneath it, such as I want to have a Carfax report, I need a criminal lookup, I have an FBI lookup, I have all these different little things that make up sell car. And then I'm going to write that to the blockchain once that's all complete. So I'm going to take the completable, futures API, and we can pull all that together into an orchestration. So that orchestration then looks like, okay, here's the current flow. It's a little bit long, a little bit dense, but the point is that you can build this in terms of getting cars, and then those get cars are going to process the car, so I'm going to get some particular data, and that particular data then is going to drive down into, get the Carfax, get the criminal lookup, and then finally come to the end and do a print line to the end. So flow is the capability of taking many functions and then kind of orchestrate them into a series of events. So let's kind of walk into
we need
here.
To speed it up, Matt. Running short.
Okay, and alias, so what we have here. And so I have a quick alias, I'll code flow. And what's that doing is actually running an execution. And so you can see the execution of these APIs actually, and these functions actually going. And so we can then drill down and see how fast and what they're doing all the way to the end, and as they complete. So what this does is it gives us, so everything from code get cars, what it does, it gives us kind of a trace route all the way through the execution code. Then the next step is saying, that's the positive step, but then there's also it helps us in terms of debugging. So just to kind of finish up here, coming as a service based on upstream FM, we're going to be delivering functions as a service. Second, it'll obviously be integrated with Oracle security solutions from end-to-end protection. And then, as you can see, all these functions have an API driven associated to them. And we're going to be integrating tightly with our API platform so that you can build mock services, and then as you build your functions out, complete them. So, Siddhartha,
yeah,
here you go.
And the next one is going to have to be really fast. That was wonderful. Matt, stay on stage. Matt, stay on stage. Yes. So, the differences here with AWS Lambda, for example, is that, you can run it anywhere, not just on the cloud platform. And two, you can write the programming language. You can write your containers in any language. The function flow chains everything together. And then lastly, oh, shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. But OK, we go to blockchain now. So on blockchain, just real quick, in this architecture, we're now going to talk about that function placing that car onto the blockchain network. So let's just talk, and then the person on the other end actually buying the blockchain. So what is blockchain? It's a system for managing distributed ledgers in a peer-to-peer network, which means that not everyone is fully trusted, but you have many players who want to be able to do a transaction. And today, the reconciliation of those transactions is all done via emails or Excel spreadsheets being exchanged. For example, you have a manufacturer who then ships the good via a shipper. The shipper then delivers the goods through customs and over to the end person receiving the goods. There has to be validation across the board, and today that takes a lot of time. So now if multiple parties can actually transact on a blockchain, you have transparency the minute the transaction is done, because the transaction is immutable, which means it cannot be changed, and that there are at least 2 or 3 people who've endorsed the transaction, which means the transaction actually happened. So if you look at some of the key use cases that we've seen, this is where I was talking about everyone's thinking about use cases. We have financial services-based use cases. We have supply chain-based use cases. I just talked about the supply chain with the shipper. We have public sector-based use cases and healthcare-based use cases. And one of the use cases that is becoming very popular is identity. How can you have shared identity so that, for example, the government of Canada is saying that if you set up an identity with a bank, then you don't need to recreate your identity when you go to get a new cell phone account with T-Mobile or whoever it might be. They can actually share identity by requesting off a blockchain if this person has an identity that's been well authenticated. So less work for the consumer, less work for the authorizer on the front end. And if you think about the patterns for blockchain, You can enable distributed autonomous marketplaces like the identity case, reduce friction, so that's reducing the amount of effort needed, the time needed for reconciliation. You can securely maintain and share the decentralized records like identities, and very importantly, track the provenance of documents. Provenance means where was this produced, what were the goods used that were produced. So for example, for my Lexus MFA, I want to make sure that when I'm buying the car, not only do I know, yes, the car is there, but also that it was always taken to a Lexus dealership. Where were the parts purchased from? Were the parts original parts, or were they not original parts? I want to know all of that about the car, and that could be put on the blockchain. And if you think about challenges in terms of when you're thinking of writing blockchain applications, is that one, you have to figure out how to integrate with supply chain systems. You have to integrate with back office applications. You have to integrate with identity systems. So it takes a lot to do that integration. And production readiness. Blockchain is not easy. It takes a little bit to scale. As the chains get longer, performance gets impacted. So how do you make sure that you can have a high-performant, secure, permissioned blockchain that is running for you? And also, technology is changing really, really fast. You look at MapReduce, for example, on the fast data side. That was the technology 2-3 years ago. Now it's all Spark. So how do you insulate yourself from these technology changes where Hyperledger Fabric is just in its version 1.0? And then operational challenges. So when you want to set up this network, how do you bring on members? How do you monitor what's going on? How do you support and lifecycle management for this entire blockchain? So what we've done at Oracle is we're delivering blockchain as a service, and Matt's going to demonstrate that, which makes it very easy for you because we're using Hyperledger, and we're giving you an implementation that is extremely secure and scalable. We, in fact, took the team that was working on our Tuxedo application, which is a distributed transaction management application, and I've been able to leverage that team to make sure that we can have a highly scalable distributed transaction mechanism. So now you can just come and say, I want to implement my use case, use a couple APIs to be able to execute transactions onto the blockchain. And that's what Matt's going to talk about. And it's running on our infrastructure platform, which is giving you a lot of high performance built into it. So Matt, if we can do a quick demo, and we do need to move fast.
I certainly will.
Yes.
OK, so first of all, what we're going to do is do a quick closeout of here. And say, because now we got to buy the car. We're actually going to buy the car back. And so we're going to buy the car. And it's relative to the blockchain discussion. So you saw this with Siddharth, is we have different cars that we could choose from. But let's say if I want to say I have a Lexus, I'd prefer to have a Lexus. What we're doing here is that we're searching across the blockchain and saying, oh, I don't have one in my dealership, but I may have one in another dealership. And so that's the key thing. It's finding this new car. So we can prove that that's the right car. And then I can say I'd like to purchase it. So we're committing a transaction on the blockchain network at this point. And so we can say, hey, wait a minute, it's $399,000. Somebody made a markup. And what this means is that it's permission between two dealers, so that we can look at what the two dealers are actually talking about, and only they are involved in that transaction. So I'm going to say yes, I want to confirm that. And so we'll complete the transaction, we'll do the paperwork, we'll go to the dealership and take care of that. But the other piece of this is that this is an application for the blockchain network, right? And so what we can also build other applications that are associated to this. Both of them are using what's called the REST proxy. So as a developer, from a developer perspective, we want to do 6LIC 274, I think is the car. We can build custom applications on the blockchain using a REST proxy. So as a developer, there's three things that you're going to be doing. You're going to be developing applications which are outside of the blockchain, and then those applications will interact with what's called chain code. And chain code is usually built in Go, and soon in Java, is that it'll be built, and that is the contract that builds consensus on the transaction on the blockchain. So the key thing is that what you're seeing here, this is a custom app, and we can see that the transaction has occurred, and you can see several transactions, part of the testing we've been doing, and also what are the API details. And this is showing all the detail of the transaction that's occurring on the blockchain. So this is a call, that's a REST call. That's
so that was a sample application that was using the same API call that your bot was using.
Exactly. Yeah. So we build multiple applications accessing the blockchain and accessing the chain code. So from the network perspective, we have multiple networks here. We have one network, then an originator. And this, we can then say, what does this network look like? And this is how the blockchain, we can visualize the overall blockchain. We can say there's organizations, there's a founding organization, then there's multiple organizations in that blockchain. And then there are peer nodes, and these are the green things. And those peer nodes basically process what's going to be happening on the Hyperledger fabric. And then finally, and before we kind of go off and finish up here, is that we have the concept of nodes. And this is what is key, it's important. Think of what nodes are in blockchain, and particularly the Hyperledger fabric, is that these are subnets in terms of organization A talks to organization B, and only organization A can talk to organization B. And so we can set up these subnets. So for example, the difference between Bob and John's blockchain is that I don't care about what other parties may not need to know about what price was paid for the car, may not need to know about the shipping and how that car was shipped to the other dealership. In other words, we can do this in a permissioned manner, leveraging channels inside of the Hyperledger fabric. So I'll kind of stand down from here and go back to the presentation so we can keep us on schedule. And so basically on the left-hand side, the key things from a developer perspective is you build really through two key things. One is on the left-hand side are the applications. And so, whether it be a chatbot, whether it be a trace application, and then you define the network, which is in the middle. How do these channels work? And then you define what the chain code is going to do. And that's the most important piece. That is the smart contract. That is the piece that actually builds the consensus that you're going to install onto the blockchain. And on the right-hand side, we're adding value in terms of getting administration console, a REST proxy, and these other capabilities, and really hardening the overall Hyperledger fabric. So, Siddharth?
Great. Thanks a lot.
Sure enough. Thank you.
That was a great demo there. So we need to work hard on leveraging the APIs and then using or writing the smart contracts. In this case, it'd be putting the car onto the blockchain network. So just to wrap up really quickly about our application development platform, we've shown you some parts of it, but we've got an entire CI/CD pipeline so that you don't have to set up Jenkins or Jira, et cetera, if you don't want to. But if you have Jenkins, for example, continuous integration, you can easily blend it in. We've got Maven already built in there. In addition, the CI/CD pipeline understands containers natively. So when you, for example, check in code, and we know you're going to write a container-based application, we'll automatically build a Docker image. The pipeline knows that that Docker image needs to be registered, and that it could be put in a public registry or in a private registry, and then be able to deploy that as a container onto a Kubernetes-based platform. We're providing you Kubernetes as a service so that you don't have to worry about spinning up Kubernetes, maintaining Kubernetes, scaling Kubernetes, et cetera. Your containers automatically get deployed onto Kubernetes. Or if you want, you can say, I'm just going to bring my code, and I'm writing the code in PHP, Ruby, Go, Java, it doesn't matter. We actually manage the runtime for you, where we're running it on containers, but you're not aware that it's running on containers. So either you can be container native, or you can just bring code, and we can run it on containers for you. And then we talked about the mobile cloud capabilities, the chatbot functionality, plus all the mobile backend as a service capabilities, and the integration to the backend applications. The API-first development, you should check out apiary.io. So that is a place where you can go and write documentation, and that creates an API. That API is actually running on a mock server, so that without writing the implementation of that API, you can actually go to someone who's going to use your API, get them to use it, collaborate on what the actual contract should be. Once you have that contract agreed to, then you can go and implement the API. And then we're giving you lifecycle management for the APIs, so that from build to test to run, et cetera, you've got insight into the performance of the APIs. You've got an API gateway that gives you security, so validation, authentication, rating, throttling, et cetera. And that API gateway can run anywhere. So it can run in your on-premise application environment. It can run in the Oracle public cloud, or it can run on a third-party cloud. So an entire API management platform with a portal to expose to developers who are going to consume your APIs. Obviously, if you're writing in Java and want to use WebLogic, we're delivering WebLogic delivered as a service. And then finally, for those folks who want to do rapid prototyping and be able to build applications where they're not writing code, but they want to work with the line of business users, show them what the application could look like, we're actually giving you a visual development environment where with drag and drop, you can build out the application very easily. And then it can generate the code for you from that visual developed environment, and you can extend the code from there. And this is what all our platform looks like. We talked a lot about the front-end tooling, the API design, and the visual development capabilities, the back-end services with functions, chatbots. And then I didn't talk a lot about the performance management capabilities. So from the cloud, we're able to monitor and manage your applications where you don't have to, where we've created one consolidated data platform for log data, performance data, user experience data, config data, and we're applying machine to this data because we've got tons of data and we've got tons of compute capacity in the cloud where you no longer have to tell us what thresholds to set. We learn the thresholds over time. We learn the server topology over time. So now you don't have to monitor and manage your on-premise monitoring management infrastructure, and you don't have to spend time setting thresholds, et cetera. You as developers can get real-time feedback into what's going on with the application. And then the Event Hub Cloud Service, Kafka, giving you scalable Kafka clusters. You being able to leverage the eventing, but you don't have to worry about the infrastructure and the scaling when message storms are coming in. Identity, being able to do single sign-on from your application to other applications. And then integration, being able to very easily integrate your applications with back-office applications. We're giving you adapters to various SaaS applications and on-premise applications. And finally, data stores, you don't have to just use the Oracle database. We're giving you MySQL delivered as a service. We're giving you Cassandra, NoSQL delivered as a service. And if you want, you could even run MongoDB on our IaaS. And all of this is running on a very performant, highly scalable, secure IaaS platform. Lots of traction for the Oracle Cloud. The analysts are rating us at the very top in terms of Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Waves. Lots of apps in the cloud marketplace. And then for developers, go to developer.oracle.com. And that's the place where we're putting all our content for developers. You can see blogs. You can see the content on containers, APIs, DevOps, tooling, et cetera. So thank you, and would love to get your feedback. We'll be around if there are any questions. We can take those. Rex?
Great. Thank you, Siddharth. That was a fantastic keynote. Thanks to Matt and Eric as well. I just have a couple of public service announcements, and then we'll release you for the coffee break. So let's see here. Does this not? Maybe we've gone too far. So first of all, just outside here, there's a demo lounge. You see a lot of great demos for 3D printing, for IoT beer making and whatnot. One of the more interesting things out there is Zip Lab. This is a place where you can get actually hands-on with our product. We're running a bit of a competition, and if you get a bunch of these Zip Labs done quickly, you will win this fantastic prize. It is a modular drone. This looks like it has 6 props. So get out there and get hands-on with our product. Another thing that I'd like to mention is during lunch, we have an event to promote diversity and inclusion, women in technology, featuring some of the speakers that we have here today. And this is open to all people, men, women, both. So please come and join us for that lunch and meet some of our women technologists. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. I believe Viscosity and Crafter are out there in the lounge as well. So please say hello and take a look at what they have to show you. Ken mentioned Java 10. So Java 10 was announced, I think, about a month ago at Code Chicago. And so you can get it here. Get your hands on the latest version of Java 10. I think a number of you may also be into MySQL, a very popular database. This is what's new in the latest version, MySQL 8. It features some interesting NoSQL as well as relational capability. And as with every version, some significant performance improvements have been added in this latest version. So take a look at that. A number of you are probably here for education, right? And one place where you can get it is Oracle University. They offer a number of great courses on a number of technologies. And to take a look at what they have, I think there's a special offer here if you go to that URL. The developer portal, I'll skip this because Siddharth already mentioned it. This is a quick snapshot of the rest of today. So we are a little behind, but you still have about 15 minutes left of a coffee break. And then after that, we have got a very strong lineup of sessions as well as hands-on labs. There should be, I believe, 4 parallel sessions. It's going to happen in this room and 3 other rooms. So you can choose at any point in time one of these 4 sessions or the hands-on labs, and it goes until the end of today. And if you don't already have it, the specifics are on the app on your device. And last but not least, I want to encourage you to check out what we have to offer. Siddharth showed you about 30 services that we have for developers in Oracle Cloud. As a special thanks for your coming here today, we want to offer you $500 of free credit. This is actually more than our normal offer. We normally offer about $300, so this is a little bit of a boost. So it's a limited, exclusive, also non-transferable offer. So that URL that you see here is only good for those of you here today. You have to sign up using the same email address that you used to sign up for Oracle Code. And unfortunately, you can't transfer it to your colleague. But it's sort of a thank you for being here today. So check it out. And with that, I'd like to wish you a great Oracle Code event. Thank you so much for coming.